Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel for a brand new mystery with Molly, and in today's video we're going to be talking about a Jane Doe case. This Jane Doe is known as the Angel of the Meadow, and I haven't actually covered a Jane or John Doe case on my channel in quite a few months, so this is very much overdue. Yeah, I haven't covered one in a while, and so I thought, you know what, I'm going to start covering them again because I think these cases are so important. It's so important to spread awareness about John and Jane Doe cases in the hope that we can identify some of these people. I have a feeling this video is probably going to be on the shorter side because there isn't too much information about this Jane Doe. Like all Doe cases really, there isn't too much information about them because obviously we don't know who they were. So it will be a little bit shorter than my regular videos, but I hope you enjoy it nevertheless, and give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Quickly before I get into it, I just want to clarify that my intent with these videos is never to offend or upset anyone that may have been involved with this case. The information I've collected for this video has been from several different sources online, all of which are linked in the description box. So this case took place in the northeast of Manchester in the UK, and this Jane Doe is known as the Angel of the Meadow because the place where she was discovered is called Angel Meadows. Angel Meadows today is a very beautiful area. It's a big public park and it's called St. Michael's Flags and Angel Meadows Park. I've never been there myself, but from pictures online it looks like a really nice place. But years and years before it was a park, it was a Victorian slum, and as you can imagine, conditions back then were very bad. And a German philosopher named Friedrich Engels, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, described the place as hell on earth. But at the time of this case taking place in 2010, the site hadn't really been touched since the 1960s, and before it was Angel Meadows Park, it was actually an abandoned car park site. The site was between Angel Street, Danzig Street and Miller Street, with wooden panels around an old abandoned car park building area. That was until 2010 when this area was taken over by the cooperative group. Those who live in Britain will probably know what the cooperative is, or the co-op as a lot of people call it. It's just like a supermarket chain that we have here. Although they don't just do supermarkets, they also have like a bank business and a funeral director business. Not that that is relevant to the case at all. But anyway, in 2010 the cooperative group took over this Angel Meadow area and they planned on building their headquarters there, their head offices. And so they were just getting the site ready for redevelopment. On the 25th of January 2010, like I said, these workmen were preparing the site for redevelopment when one of these men came across a human skull on the site. So immediately they contacted the police at around 4 p.m. that day, and the police started investigating the scene. And it wasn't long before police found even more human skeletal remains underneath some blue carpet on the site. These remains were soon determined to be that of a female, and initially the police didn't think that her death was anything suspicious. However, if you think about it, just the way in which this skeleton was found, she was wrapped in blue carpet and then hidden underneath some more carpet in an abandoned car park area. It just seems as though someone was trying to hide this body, which suggests that this person's death may not have been accidental. And this was confirmed when this woman's body was taken for an autopsy, which showed that she had a fractured jaw, a fractured collarbone and fractures to 2 bones in her neck, indicating that she had been beaten to death and that this was probably a homicide. This female victim was later given the name the Angel of the Meadow, obviously because the location that she was found was Angel Meadows. So now I'm going to talk through what was found with this woman's remains, but quickly before I do, I just want to let you know that some sources online, basically there were clothes found either on or near her body. Some sources online say that she was wearing these clothes, whereas other sources say that these clothes were just next to her body, so she was naked. Another source said that just the bottom half of her body was naked, so I'm not sure what's true there. But nevertheless, I'm just going to talk through now what clothes and items were found either on or near her body when she was found. So there was a blue bra, a blue skinny rib jumper, which was a very popular style jumper in the 1970s, as well as a green pinafore dress. And this dress was a very distinctive piece of clothing. I'll put a picture of the pattern of this dress on the screen now, but it had large buttons on it with the design of a man and a woman on the front with the words Madame and Monsieur written on the fabric. And the police determined that this type of print would have been manufactured and worn mostly between the years 1973 and 1976. So that gives us a bit of an indicator as to when this woman was alive and when she wore this clothing, if that makes sense. Also found at the scene was one black high-heeled shoe and the other was never found. So maybe the killer took this shoe with him and kept it as some kind of trophy, or maybe it just fell off in the struggle because obviously she suffered a very violent death. Maybe this shoe came off when the killer was transporting her body, because I don't believe the police think that the place that she was found was where she was killed. I believe that they think she was killed somewhere else and then the killer took her body to this location to hide it. Now, as I just mentioned, some sources online said that this woman was wearing these clothes. Other sources said that she wasn't and they were just kind of near her body or next to her body. Other sources said that she had her top clothing on and then her dress was pulled up so that she was completely exposed, obviously suggesting that she was possibly raped or sexually assaulted. But yeah, the police believe that she was probably sexually assaulted, but obviously because of how badly decomposed her remains were, they were unable to tell. Also found at the scene was an empty handbag, which they believe probably belonged to this woman, and also a pair of tights. Another thing that they found near her body was a 1960s Guinness measuring chart, which was used in like pubs and bars. But I don't know if police think that's even relevant to the case. Maybe that was just there before her body was dumped. But yeah, I thought I'd include it anyway, just because it's another thing that was found near her body. Okay, so now let's talk about this blue carpet that was found at the scene. So this woman was found wrapped in this blue carpet, and then more of this blue carpet was on top of her body to conceal it. There were also traces of orange carpet as well at the scene. But this carpet was found to have been from the interior of a Ford Cortina car, and there was a hole in the carpet which perfectly fit the shape of the car's gear stick. So someone had cut this carpet out of a Ford Cortina car and used it to conceal this woman's body. And just as a side note, Ford Cortina cars were the UK's best-selling car in the 1970s, which indicates that the killer probably owned this type of car, although that doesn't really narrow down the search because, like I just said, this was the UK's best-selling car in the 1970s. A lot of people would have had that car. Specialists conducted forensic tests on this Jane Doe's remains and also carbon-14 testing on her teeth and her bones, and this concluded that she likely died sometime between the years 1975 and 1988. Which also matches up with the evidence found at the scene. Obviously, the green pinafore dress was a very popular style in the 1970s, and the carpet that she was found wrapped up in was from a Ford Cortina car, which, as I've said, was the UK's best-selling car in the 70s. Investigators believe that this woman would have been between the ages of 18 to 35 when she was alive, and she was born sometime between 1950 and 1955. They also theorized that she was either European, Middle Eastern, or Indian, and that her height was anywhere between 5'1" and 5'7" when she was killed. And she was of average build and around a size 12 in clothing. They also found that she had a number of fillings in her teeth, and one of her upper teeth were actually missing. And this tooth was missing when she was alive, so she probably didn't have this tooth for quite some time before her death, which is something that often is quite noticeable about a person. If they're smiling or if you're talking to them, a lot of the time you can see if they don't have one of their teeth, and so it's possible that someone would be able to recognize her because of this. And as we know, she suffered a very violent death. It's believed that she was probably beaten to death, but because of how badly decomposed her remains were, this couldn't be confirmed. But like I mentioned earlier, she did suffer fractures to her jaw, her collarbones and her neck. So once the police had all this information about Jane Doe, like the items of clothing, the stuff that was found around the scene, a vague description of what she could have looked like because of her teeth, they released this information to the public in the hopes that someone would recognize her or recognize an item of clothing. But obviously that wasn't really much to go on, and so the police didn't really get any tips or leads or clues as to who this woman could have been or who her killer was. Then in 2011, a team of experts used facial mapping techniques to reconstruct Jane Doe's facial features. And in May of that same year, the police released this facial reconstruction of what experts believe this woman may have looked like when she was alive. So I'll pop that picture on screen. This facial reconstruction was also featured on an episode of Crime Watch in the hopes that someone would recognize this woman and come forward. And the police did receive many phone calls, but unfortunately none of these leads went anywhere and she remained unidentified. Around this same time, the police theorized that maybe this Jane Doe was one of 3 women who are known to have gone missing in the Manchester area but had never been found. These 3 women were Zoe Simpson, who disappeared in 1996, Helen Sage, who disappeared in 1997, and Helen McCourt, who was murdered in 1988. And so the Angel of the Meadows dental records were compared to the dental records of these 3 missing women, and they were found not to be a match. None of these 3 women were the Angel of the Meadow. DNA was somehow obtained from Jane Doe's remains, and this DNA sample was checked against missing persons databases, and from this the Greater Manchester Police were able to rule out over 400 missing women as being her. Her DNA was also checked against DNA samples that were recovered from the investigations into 2 convicted killers, Peter Tobin and Ronald Castry. Peter Tobin was a Scottish serial killer who officially has been linked and convicted for the murders of 3 women. However, the police theorised that maybe this Jane Doe could have been one of Peter Tobin's victims. And the same with Ronald Castry. He was a convicted killer. He was responsible for the murder of 11-year-old Leslie Molseed. And again, it was theorised that he could have been responsible for this Jane Doe's murder. However, from DNA analysis, the police were able to rule out both Peter Tobin and Ronald Castry as being her killer. I haven't actually done a video on either of those 2 killers, so if you would like to know more about their crimes, let me know in the comments and I can definitely cover those cases. They also theorised whether a man named James Lloyd could have been this woman's killer. James Lloyd was a convicted serial rapist. He was known as the Rotherham Shoe Rapist because he was active in the 1980s in Rotherham in South Yorkshire, and he apparently had a fetish for feet. He would rape women and then take their shoes as trophies because he had a feet fetish. Feet fetish? Foot fetish? Foot fetish. And if you remember, the Angel of the Meadow was found with only one of her shoes. The other one has never been found. However, I don't believe James Lloyd ever killed any of the women that he raped. I think that he just raped them. But eventually he was ruled out as being the Angel of the Meadows killer anyway. So over the years, the police have followed up many tips and leads from people who believe they know who this woman was, including one all the way from Tanzania. A Tanzanian family made contact with the police investigating this case, and they said that they believe this Jane Doe was possibly a relative of theirs, and this lead was looking like a very promising one. However, I couldn't actually find online what happened with that and where that went, so I believe that this was probably ruled out because obviously this Jane Doe is still unidentified to this day. So after 5 years of investigators trying to find out who this Jane Doe was, her remains were eventually laid to rest in a cemetery in Manchester in 2015. She was buried in an unmarked grave, and only 2 people attended her burial, those being 2 of the detectives that worked on her case. The head of the Cold Case Review Unit, Martin Bromley, said about the angel of the Meadow, Jane Doe. This lady might have been put out of somebody's mind temporarily, but she will never be forgotten. There will be a family member out there somewhere who knows who she is and who can unlock that key and identify her. We are determined to get a just outcome for the victim, and we will never give up hope. The police do have a DNA profile of the victim, so hopefully one day her DNA can be matched to someone and we will finally know who she was. And hopefully from that, her killer will be caught and be brought to justice. That is, if they are still alive today. And I will leave some information in the description box of this video just in case anyone's watching this who might know something about this case. It's a long shot, but I will leave it there anyway. I feel so passionate about Jane and John Doe cases, and I definitely plan on covering more on this channel because I just think they are so important to talk about and spread awareness about. I'm also going to leave a link in the description to the DNA Doe Project. They are an organisation that uses genetic genealogy in an attempt to identify John and Jane Doe cases, and they accept donations to help fund the work that they do. So if you'd like to donate, I will leave the link down below. And yeah, that is pretty much it for this case. As usual, please do leave your case suggestions in the comments of this video. Leave your John and Jane Doe case suggestions. Quickly before I go, I just want to give a special shout out to the members of my Patreon. Thank you so much for your support, guys. If anyone else wants to become a member of our little Patreon family, the link is always in the description of my videos. I just thought I would let you guys know here that the Crime Time podcast is going to be coming back. For those of you who aren't aware, myself, Joshua Miles, Kirsty Sky and Dark Curiosities all have a podcast which is called Crime Time. Season 1 of the podcast finished in October of last year, and season 2 is going to be coming back sometime in March, so make sure you are subscribed to the podcast channel. I will leave it linked in the description box. Please do give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you again very soon for another mystery with Mollie. Bye guys.